Today's title: 494 Days Using Claude AI to Build My Business. What I learned: how to actually use Claude in your business. I've spent the last 494 days using Claude to build and run my consulting business, mostly on my own. In that time, I've built more than 40 things with it, including websites, sales pages, the internal systems I run the businesses on, even a working application called Aseyi that I built with these tools and myself. I didn't start here. I started on ChatGPT like everyone else and Gemini back when they could barely write a few lines of code. Then I moved on to Cursor when I got serious about building something real. None of it worked the way the hype promised, but it did teach me how LLMs work at their core. This video is what I learned in those 494 days to help me run my business better. It isn't a list of prompts and tricks. It is the thing behind the tricks. What Claude actually is, how it really works, and why it behaves the way it does. Once you understand that, you can get what you actually want out of it instead of fighting it every single day. And no, Claude is not going to build you a £50,000 a month business. What I show you works whether you use Claude app or Claude Code, whether you're building a software or doing a simple business task. The interface may change, the task may change. What's going on under the hood to make it all possible does not change at all. We're going to start with what Claude actually is, because everything comes from it, then why it gets things confidently wrong, and the things it's been trained to do that work against you. From there, the one habit that fixes most of it, and the way I set up Claude so it knows my business and it gets better on its own. We're going to finish this with what to trust it with, what to never hand over to it, and how to use it to get sharper yourself, not just quicker. By the end, you will understand what's happening every single time you give Claude an instruction, and you will know how to get far more out of it than you do today. The simple thing that comes back wrong. You've probably had at least one of this happen to you. You ask Claude for something very simple, whether that's a sales script or some copy, one section of a landing page, or even a small function in your code. What comes back may look right, it reads well, and Claude is sure of itself. Then you look closer and it isn't even what you asked for. It's changed something you told it to leave alone, or made up a detail that isn't true and handed you its best version of that thing instead. So you ask again, wording it differently. This time it gives you something different, not better, just different. You change a few words, run it again, and it shifts again. Eventually, you're further from what you actually wanted it to do than when you started. If you felt that before, the cause is always almost the same. You're working the tool without knowing the rules of the thing in front of you. Once you know what it is, you can see exactly why it did that and what to do instead. How you react to that frustrating moment tends to drop you into one of two camps. Some people decide AI is overhyped, a toy that you can't trust, and they just go back to doing everything themselves. Other people will tell you it's basically magic and it will be running their business by next year. Both are wrong, and both of them come from not understanding the tool very well. For this video, we are taking a third way. You learn what Claude actually is, and you get far more out of it without falling for the hype and the BS floating around. So we start with the single most important thing to understand about Claude. What Claude actually is: a guessing machine. Let's start with the one fact that explains everything else about Claude. Contrary to what you might believe right now, Claude does not know things, it predicts them. This is what the name is telling you. LLM stands for Large Language Model. And a language model is simply a system that is built to predict the likely language, the next word, from the words that came before it. Large just means it was trained on a huge amount of text, so the name is really just a job description, a big system for predicting words. It is so easy to picture AI as something that has read everything and simply looks up the right answer when you ask a question. That isn't what is happening. Claude was trained by being shown an enormous amount of text and made to play one game over and over again. Given the words so far, guess the words that is most likely to come next. Then guess the one after that. The most likely word is not always the right one, but that is the only game it is playing. It is got so good at it that it can hold a conversation, write a sales page, or build you a working app. Behind all of it, that's still the only thing that it is doing. It is predicting the most likely next piece of text, one piece at a time. So when you ask Claude or any LLM something, it isn't pulling a fact out of a drawer. It is generating what a good answer would probably look like from the patterns it's picked up in the training. Most of the time, the prediction is very good, which is exactly why it feels like it knows what it is doing, but it never actually knows. It guesses every single time. A brilliant guess, usually, still a guess. I learned this by building real applications. When I got serious about my coaching application, I was deep in the code with these models every single day, and you cannot spend long in there without seeing the limits as well as the potential. I would give it a clear rule for the project and simple things to build, and it would hand me back something that looked right and confident on the surface, but wasn't quite what I asked for once I looked closely. Why is this? Because it is predicting what usually comes next in the code like mine. And what usually comes next isn't always what I told it to do. Once you understand that, everything else Claude does starts to make a bit more sense. It explains why it sounds so certain even when it's wrong, and why you can ask the same questions in 10 different chats and get 10 answers that are similar but never the same. It all traces back to this. It is a prediction engine, a guessing machine. Work with it like one and you'll get far more out of it than someone who thinks they are talking to a database that holds all the answers. That's a quick foundation on how Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and every other LLM out there actually work. Claude always wants to please you. Now that you know that Claude is guessing with a high degree of predictability, 3 of its most annoying habits would make more sense to you, and you can plan for all 3. None of them are faults that you can report and get fixed. They are simply what a guessing machine does. Once you can see them coming, they stop catching you out all the time. Let's start with the most obvious one. Claude always sounds so completely sure of itself, even when it's completely wrong. When it doesn't have the full picture, it does not stop and tell you so. Instead, it gives you the best guess and presents it as the real answer. It presents it as a fact. Claude is built to respond, not to tell you when it is stuck. So it fills the gap with something that looks right. This is what people mean when they say AI hallucinates. For example, if you ask it for a statistics to back up a claim, it can hand you a number and a source that looks completely real but never existed. Or you ask it for help with your code, it uses a function that looks correct but does not actually exist. The dangerous part is there is no warning on it. A made-up answer comes out looking identical to a true one. Same confidence, same clean formatting, and because you don't know any better, nothing tells you that this one is a guess and that one is a fact. People wrongly say that AI or Claude in general is lying, but lying means you know the truth and choose to hide it. And Claude usually does not know what the truth is in the first place, which is where the hallucination comes from. It is only doing what it is built to do, handing you the most convincing answer it can build from the pattern that is learned. Convincing and correct are not the same thing, and Claude cannot tell the difference between them. Checking that is your job. You are still the user and Claude is just a tool. So the rule that comes out of this is simple. Never take a fact, a number, a name, a quote from Claude at face value when it matters. If it's going in front of a client, into your account, or onto your website, you have to check it yourself and be very careful, because the better Claude gets, the easier this is to forget. When it is right nearly every single time, you stop checking, and this is when the occasional wrong answer slips through the crack. The second habit that you will run into is that the same question gives you a different answer each time. As I mentioned briefly earlier, ask Claude the same thing in 10 separate chats and you get 10 answers, all very close but non-identical. That isn't a glitch. Remember, it works by guessing the next word, and it doesn't always go with the top guess. Sometimes it picks one of the other likely words instead. That randomness is why its answer feels very natural and varied, and it's also why no two answers are ever exactly the same. In the Claude app and in Claude Code, you don't get control over that dial, so a bit of variety is the normal state, not the exception. If you use Claude through its backend, the API, you get more control over it. But that is an expensive way to work because the API costs add up very fast. In practice, this means you cannot assume that because something worked the last time, it will work the same way this time as well. What came out yesterday might not come out today, even with the exact same prompt. So if you do work that needs the same standard every time, and in a business you almost always do, you will not get there by hoping Claude repeats itself. You get there from how you set the job up, the detailed instructions, and the context that you give it. The last habit is the one most likely to cost you. Claude is built to please you. After it was trained on all that text, It went through a second stage where people were paid to rate its answers, and it learns to give the kind of answers people rate highly. Researchers call this reinforcement learning from human feedback. This is a big part of what makes it so helpful and so easy to talk to. It also has a side effect. It leans towards telling you what you want to hear. It will agree with you a bit too readily and call your idea a strong one and back the way that you already seem to be learning, because this is the sort of answers that scored well during the research phase. There is a name for this. It is called Sycophancy, and Anthropic, the company that makes Claude, has published research showing it across all the big AI models, not only their own. It makes sense when you remember what Claude is. It is a product. It is built to satisfy a huge general market, and most people prefer the assistant that agrees with them and makes them feel clever. When you're running a 6 or 7 figure business, this is the one to watch carefully, because Claude makes every move feel good, and good feelings are easy to trust. When you want a straight answer, you have to work against it. Don't ask it, is this a good idea? Because it will usually tell you it is. Ask it to argue the other side instead. Tell it to find the holes and the pitfalls in your plan and to give you the strongest case a client would make against you. I do this every single day. The first answer Claude gives me is the polite, agreeable one. The real answer that is worth anything to me or my business is usually the one I get after multiple pushbacks and refinements. Put all of these 3 habits together and you can see the real character of the tool. It is sure of itself whether or not it should be. It gives you a slightly different answer every single time, and it wants to keep you happy. None of that makes it bad. It makes it predictable. And once you can predict how something behaves, you can steer it in the direction that you want. Almost everything useful that I get out of Claude comes from cutting down how much it has to guess, which makes its answers sharper and more reliable. Your one job: reduce the guessing. Every one of those habits gets smaller when Claude has less room to guess. Give it less to fill in on its own, and the confidence wrong answers, the different results each time, and the urge to please you all become much easier to manage. So the most useful thing that you can do is find ways to reduce how much it has to guess. You can reduce the guessing in 2 ways. Firstly, give it better direction by telling it clearly what you actually want. And secondly, you give it better context, which means telling it the things it has no way of knowing on its own. Get the direction and the context right, and most of your problems with Claude will disappear. Start with the direction. Vague questions get vague answers. If you type, "Write me a sales emails," Claude asks to guess what it's for, what you sell, what you want the reader to do, and what you actually sound like. It will guess all of it and hand you something generic, because a generic request can only produce a generic answer. Compare that to telling it that the email is a warm lead who booked a call and did not show up, and you want them to rebook, that your tone is direct and friendly, and that it should be under 120 words. Now it barely has to guess at all. Same tool, completely different results, and the only thing that changed was the direction that you gave it. There is a sweet spot to aim for here. Too vague and Claude fills the gaps with its own ideas. Too rigid and you try to script every single word yourself, and you have done all the work and lost the point of using it in the first place. The aim is to be clear about the outcome you want and the rules it must follow, then let it handle the rest. Tell it where to go and what to avoid, not how to move every step of the way. When it comes to context, it is safe to assume that what feels obvious to you is invisible to Claude. It does not know your business, your client, your offer, or the call you had this morning unless you put it in front of it. It only knows what is in the conversation. So the more relevant detail that you give it, the less it has to invent. Take that same sales email. For Claude to write it well, it helps to know what you actually do for that lead and what happened on the call that they missed. All of that is details it cannot get anywhere else, and every piece of it is one less guess that it has to make. A shortcut that works better than a long description is to show it an example. If you have a sales emails that worked or any good example from a past client, give it that and tell it to use that style, but ask it to confirm it understands the style before it starts any type of writing. A real example teaches Claude more than a long paragraph describing exactly what you want, because it can see the thing instead of guessing at your words. Whenever you can show it rather than tell it, please do it. This is why the same tool can feel useless to one person and brilliant to another person. Claude is only ever as good as the person that is using it. A vague one-liner gets you a vague guess, and that is usually the point where people decide that the tool is rubbish. Give it proper direction and context, and there is barely anything left for it to get wrong. I know all of this sounds like a lot of typing, and yes, it would be. So I stopped typing it I dictate to Claude now, I talk it out loud and let it turn my words into the instructions. I was slow to try this feature at first, partly because I was skeptical and partly because I have an accent and assumed it would get half my words wrong. Now I use it constantly because you think and speak faster than you can type. And when you're talking, you naturally give more detail than you ever would when you're writing. All that extra detail gives Claude more to work from, so it has to guess less. Dictation is definitely the easiest upgrade you can make right now when you're using any AI tool. Doing all of this from scratch every single time would wear you out, so you don't have to do that. You just have to set up Claude once so it already knows how you work and it carries it into everything that you ask it to do. It is not always 100% accurate, but it is a good foundation to build on. That is how I run my Claude systems, so that at least they are somewhat repeatable. Give it a memory that grows with you. You do not always have to type all that context out every single time that you open Claude, so you don't. You just write it down once in files that Claude reads automatically, and it starts every job knowing exactly how you work. This is the closest thing Claude has to a memory, and it is the part that changed my results the most. The simplest version of this is a rule file, and you can write one with Claude's help in a few minutes. A rule file is a plain document where you put all the things you would otherwise have to keep telling Claude every single time. For example, how you write, the words that you never use, how you like a proposal laid out, and what your business actually does. You write it down once and Claude reads it before any answer every single time. So you stop repeating yourself. In Claude Code, this is a file it picks up automatically. It is literally called CLAUDE.md. In the Claude app, you get the same thing through the project instructions that you can save. Either way, the idea is identical. Context that is always on in the background. One warning though, having the file does not make you bulletproof. Claude still drifts. So now and then, you just have to remind it to actually follow its own rules. The other thing that makes these files work is keeping each one focused on a single job. Do not build one giant files that try to hold all your whole business, because it gets bloated and Claude loses the thread. Then falls back to the best guess about which part of the files it even applies. For example, I keep one file for how I write, one for how I do not write, another one for how a proposal should look, and separate files for each system the business runs on, and I keep them all up to date as things change. Remember, small and sharp files always beat one big one. The next step up from a rule file is a skill. A skill is just a folder with a document inside it that tells Claude how to do one specific repeatable task, and it only pulls it when that task comes up. So for anything that you do regularly, you write the steps out once as the skill, and from then on, you never have to explain it again. You just say the word and it follows the process exactly. I have a skill for everything I do in Claude Code, from design to code review to a stricter second pass on that code to building a proposal. There is one common mistake to avoid here. Every content creator tells you to download other people's skills and copy their prompts. I tried that early on and it made my work worse, because those are built on a generic user, not for me and for my business. A skill is just a document and there's nothing magic in it. So the better move is to write your own from scratch, or take one that you downloaded and just rewrite it until it matches how you actually work. And it is easy to create them because Claude will write them for you. Generic instructions will give you generic output, the same way a vague response will give you a vague answer. Your own instructions give you control and consistency. These files also compound over time, and this is where the real value is. When Claude gets something wrong, you do not just fix it for that session. You add that correction to the file as a new rule, so it never has to make that mistake again. You can even ask Claude to look back at how a job went and suggest what to add to its own instructions. I do this every single day. Do that for a few months and it genuinely gets better at working with you, not because the model got smarter, but because the setup around it did. This is what people really mean when they say Claude knows their business. It does not know anything, remember? It is reading the memory that you built for it. Setting all of this is most of the work and it is worth it. But even with the perfect setup, there is still a right way and a wrong way to hand Claude the actual job. Don't one-shot it. Plan, break it down, and protect the context. Even with the skills, the memory and the context all in place, the output from Claude is still not guaranteed. The single most common mistake is asking for too much in one go. People open Claude and ask it to build a whole landing page or write a whole report in one shot, then wonder why it comes back substandard. I know the ads will say, give it one sentence and it does the rest. This is just marketing gimmick, and you should never use Claude or any AI in that way. I advise against one-shot prompting because the errors compound. Remember, Claude is guessing its way through one step at a time, and every step builds on the one before it. So if it takes a small wrong turn early on, everything after that is built on the wrong turn, and by the end, you have a mess that takes longer to untangle than the job would have taken if you'd done it properly. The fix is to stop giving it the whole thing at once and just break the work down into manageable pieces that you can check as you go along. Take writing. If you want a long piece of work, do not ask it for the finished article. Ask it to research the subject first with a clear sense of direction. Then you verify the research yourself. Then you have to turn the research into an outline. Then you fix the outline until it is right for you. Only then do you actually ask it to write it section by section, checking each one before you move on to the next one. That way, a mistake gets caught in one section instead of compounding through the whole piece of work. Building an application works exactly the same way. If you want a landing page, do not ask it to build the whole thing in one go. Get the architecture first, the folder instructions, how everything is separated out, then set the global styling, the color tokens, after that the layout and the navigation, then build one section at a time and use a completely separate chat to write the copy. Each one of those is its own step that you can build and check before the next one, so a mistake in one never spreads to the rest. The upgrade to breaking things down is making Claude plan before it does anything. Claude Code has a plan mode for exactly this, where it looks over everything and writes it out in a plan document before it is allowed to change a single file, and you approve that plan first. In the app, you can do the same by hand. You just ask it for its plan and you read it and you refine it as many times as you need to, and only then do you tell it to go. I use this constantly because 2 minutes spent fixing the plan saves you an hour fixing the work. Planning first is the difference between Claude doing what you actually meant and Claude guessing at what you meant. On top of all of that, keep one chat for one job. When you start something new, start a new chat. This keeps the conversation focused, and there is a deeper reason for it, to do with how much Claude can actually hold at once. Every chat has a limit to how much it can hold, called the context window. As the chat fills up, Claude gets worse at keeping track of the detail inside it. Even with a context window that holds around 1 million tokens, when it gets close to full, it does something called compaction, where it summarizes the conversation so far and it carries on from the summary. The problem is that the summary is not perfect. It keeps the gist and drops all the details it decides does not matter. And the detail it drops is often the exact thing that you needed it to remember. So you need 2 habits to protect yourself. Do not let a single chat run forever, and whenever something important gets decided, get it written into a file before it can be lost in summary. Once you're working in separate single job chats, you need a way to hold it all together, and this is how I run my bigger work. I keep one master chat that holds the plan and writes the exact instruction for the other chat. Each one of those chats does one single job, and I bring the result back to the master chat to check them. Claude can actually do a version of this on its own with what it calls agents, but I mostly do it by hand because it gives me more control. The rule underneath all of this is simple. Never ask one chat to do more than one thing at a time. One last thing, and this one is only for those of you that are writing code. There is a tool called Context 7 that gives Claude the up-to-date documentation for wherever you are building with. This matters because Claude's training has a cutoff date, so it is always a few months behind the real world, and on its own, it will often write code for an older version of a tool than the one that you're actually using. Context 7 keeps it current. If you build application, it will save you a lot of broken code. To summarize, you plan before you build or do anything, you work in small defined steps that you can check, and you protect the context so nothing important ever gets lost, using a living memory file that you update as you go along. Do that and Claude becomes genuinely reliable for a huge amount of your work. Where Claude fits in your business and what it can't do. So Claude is reliable for a huge amount of your work. The real question is, which jobs should you give it and which ones should you keep out of its hands? Forget the hype and the clickbait videos for a moment. Claude cannot run your business, and it is not going to make you rich in 90 days. It cannot run your business because it does not know your business. It only knows what you load into it or what it has been programmed into it. and not what is actually going on in reality. It cannot automatically see your sales calls, the emotional reactions of the people that you're selling to, the client who is about to walk away, or the way you feel about any of it unless you put it in front of it. It is guessing from whatever is in the conversation, and everything going on in your business is far bigger than anything you can paste into a chat. So it can help you run the business, but it cannot be left in charge of it. You can never come out of the loop, or it will run the business into the ground for you. This is why I do not fully trust Claude, and I do not want to. You shouldn't as well. Not trusting it is what keeps me in control. I check what it gives me, I make the calls, and it stays a tool that I'm using rather than something making decisions for me. And that hesitation actually helps me learn Claude better because I am always looking for ways to improve how I use it. Where Claude earns its place is the menial, repetitive work, the jobs that take long hours but just need doing. For me, that covers a lot. It organizes my files, it scrapes my leads, it plans my day, it analyzes how my ads are performing, builds my presentation slides, and sorts out my inbox by what actually matters. It drafts every proposal in my own format. So all I do is dictate the details and it comes back right. It keeps the basics of my accounting tidy so my accountant has less to untangle, and it turns my meeting notes into clear action points, which makes life easier for me and my clients. None of this is glamorous. All of it used to cost me many hours and now it costs me minutes. It also means I make far fewer small decisions in a day, which leaves more for me for the decisions that actually matter. This is also why the cost makes sense to me. A lot of what I just listed would have once meant hiring someone for a month or more to just get it done for me. Now Claude just does the bulk of it, and I bring in a professional to check the important parts for a few days. So I pay a fraction of what I used to. That is how I have built more than 40 things this way, including my own app, Aseyi. I treat the spend as an investment and not a bill, but I will be straight about the cost. I am on the max plan with 20 times the usage, which is £180 a month. And for what I use Claude for, the cheaper plans were never enough. The basic paid ones run out after a couple of questions. With the way I work, if you're serious about using Claude, you just have to find the money for it. I know that is a lot and it will not be right for everyone, especially when you're starting out. There are other downsides too. It goes down sometimes, though they usually fix it within a few hours. If your whole business runs on Claude, that leaves you stuck when it happens. So you always have to have a backup plan. And depending on your plan, you will hit usage limits, which gets expensive very fast. I once burned through £150 of credit that they gave me in 2 or 3 days of work. It is a brilliant tool, but it is not the perfect one and it is not cheap either. So that is where Claude fits for me. It will not run your business and you should not want it to. What it will do is take the weight of all the work that used to bury you and annoy you, as long as you stay the one staring. Get that balance right and it gives you back something more valuable than that time, which is room for you to think. And the more you can think clearly, the more you can grow your business. Use it to get better, not just faster. For me, the extra room to think is the real benefit of Claude in my business. Most people only ever use Claude to go faster, to get more done in less time. That is useful, but it is not where the real value is. The bigger value is that Claude can help you get better at what you do, not just do it faster. Claude has been the fastest way I have found to learn new things. When there's something I do not understand, I work through it with Claude. That might be part of my own business I've been avoiding, a new marketing channel, or a number in my accounts I do not really follow. It's like having a second brain that would explain the same thing as many times as I needed to at my own pace without making me feel slow for asking. I come out of it actually understanding the thing and far faster than if I sat there struggling with it on my own. The way I do is to treat Claude as a teacher, not just a worker. So I do not just ask it to do a task. I ask it to explain how it did it and why. I ask it to teach me the part that I'm weak on. And when it makes a choice, I ask why it picked that one over another choice. And I keep telling it to push back on my own thinking, because being argued with is how you find the holes in your ideas. Do all of this regularly and two things happen. You get better at the work and you learn how Claude behaves, which makes you better at using it. I will be honest, Claude will sometimes make you feel stupid because it answers instantly and it was trained on more information than any person could ever read in a lifetime. Do not let that put you off using it. But do not go too far the other way and treat everything it says as a correct answer, because it can be confidently wrong. So use it to think better, not to stop thinking for yourself. There is a personal benefit too, especially if you run a business on your own like I do. Claude takes a lot of the small decisions off my plate. So I do have fewer of them weighing on me every single day. And when you work alone all day, it genuinely makes you feel a little less alone. You have something to think out loud with and actually answers back instead of just talking to yourself. So yes, Claude makes you faster, but the bigger prize is that it can make you better at the work while you use it. So do not just let Claude do the job for you, let it teach you while it does it. The bottom line. So those are some of the most important things I have learned in 494 days of using Claude. Claude is not a magic pill, and it is not a waste of time either. It is a guessing machine, a very good one, and almost everything comes down to how much you make it guess. Once you treat Claude as a guessing machine, everything else in this video is just a way to make it guess less. You give it clear direction and the context it cannot know on its own. You set it up once with your own files so that it remembers how you work. You hand it the job in small steps so you can check instead of one big ask. You keep the final say because it cannot run your business and should not. And you use it to get sharper, not just quicker. If you do these things, Claude becomes what it has been for me, one of the most useful tools in the business. The one condition is that you stay in control of it. One more time, Claude doesn't know things, it guesses. Your whole job is to make it guess better. One last thing before you go. Everything I do with Claude Code works better when I know exactly where my business actually stands. By that, I mean which of its systems are pulling the weight and which are holding the rest back, which is why I built my app Aseyi. It is an AI business coach that scores the 6 systems every business runs on using my own frameworks, shows you how each one is performing in real time and tells you what to work on first. It is free to start so you can see where you stand before you spend anything on it. You can download Aseyi on iOS. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. If you got something out of this, hit subscribe so the next video finds you and give it a like. It really does help push my videos. And tell me in the comments, what is the first rule file you are going to write for your business? I read them. See you in the next one.